Well, Jay, thank you very much for hosting me and hosting all of us here today. And thank you for the whole Austin Forum and for all the incredible work it does to keep us all educated. This world is advancing so fast and so incredibly well in some ways and incredibly not in some ways. And staying informed gives us all the opportunity to do something with it. I'm going to try to do my best to do better than ChatGPT. There's a very good chance this whole 1 hour could be asked as prompts to ChatGPT and they would be answered. Um, I'm going to try and do better. Um, well, first, who am I? My name is Varun. I am from Massachusetts. I work at Johnson and Johnson and have been part of the Johnson and Johnson organization for over 7 years, working with a very special group within J&J that thinks about how we can advance science, technology, and patient solutions for Johnson & Johnson through our participation in the early healthcare innovation ecosystem. So myself and my colleagues represent a network of people that work with startups, that work with early innovators, wherever they are, and try and think through how we might be able to advance their mission with Johnson & Johnson and advance Johnson & Johnson's mission with theirs. I'll talk more about how we do that. And I'll also start with a brief presentation on what Johnson & Johnson is. How many of you have heard of Johnson & Johnson? Wait, change the question. How many of you have not heard of Johnson & Johnson? How many of you have used a Johnson & Johnson product in your lives? Good. Well, I will make this about sharing with all of you perhaps things about Johnson & Johnson that you might not know about. And then transition this conversation to how AI, robotics, advanced technologies are shaping the mission of companies like ours. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on how I see through all that we do and represent, how this space has advanced and how it is going to perhaps shape the future of our healthcare in the next decade. Okay, not the first button, not the second button, not the fourth button, but the third. So as a company, Johnson & Johnson blends hard science and ingenuity. It truly does. I think as a company that was founded in 1886, it's very rare to see enterprises not just last and grow that long, but do it with heart and do it with a connectedness to the mission that it tries to serve. And I'd say that that happens through what we call our credo. The credo, at least in my opinion, is a true object of how we operate as a company. As an employee, I say I know the credo by heart, and I'm not the only one. We all truly live by it, and we recognize our first responsibility to patients, to doctors, to physicians, to healthcare workers, to people around the world that are looking for healthcare solutions. And in rooted with that, I'd like to think that in all these years and decades that we have been there for healthcare, we have done it very thoughtfully. And like I said, we started in 1886. We call ourselves the oldest startup in the world. It started as an organization to just build sterile surgical products. And today, Johnson & Johnson is a pharmaceutical company, a med tech company, and in many ways touches solutions, and whether they're engineering solutions or scientifically biology solutions across therapeutic areas like oncology, immunology. We are looking into Alzheimer's disease. We are actively, like building robots to support surgery in hospitals today. And the trajectory we'll go through in a few slides, but they all focus, they all sit in a bucket of 2 or 3 big areas of like focus, if you will. Like we try and think of the diseases that we learn about and we invest in as areas that we can either prevent, treat, and cure, or combination thereof. The the fact that we are a pharmaceutical company and a medtech company gives us a specific advantage in being able to look at a disease that holistically. For example, say a patient has lung cancer. The process of solving for lung cancer isn't necessarily just medicine. It also requires sometimes surgery. If someone has lung cancer too late, and if they're caught too late, it's surgical intervention. If it's chemotherapy, it's a drug. If it's a systematic therapy, it may be a drug. But to have options across the board so that we're able to look at the disease holistically and come up with the right solution for the right patient, perhaps is a unique way through which we can serve the community. Now, we are, because of this wide moat of responsibility of being a medtech company and a pharmaceutical company, our organizations are designed to be experts in biology and surgical science. You can see through Johnson & Johnson's, so if you work at Johnson & Johnson, or if you're interested to work at Johnson & Johnson, you can see careers and opportunities across research and development. And in research and development, it can be drug discovery, biomedical engineering, front-end engineering. How might we learn straight from the hospital room how minute changes can make a tremendous impact to the products that we already have? Or how might we look at the next revolution of it? You'd see opportunities in designing through data science, through digital health, using AI to actually help us get to better therapeutic products faster, or running clinical trials more efficiently. You'd also see an increasing number of opportunities in how we innovate supply chain. If there's anything the whole world learned through COVID was the importance of our supply chain, and that there are technologies available today that can help us get from solve for the complex workflows that are part of making a medicine in one manufacturing site, finding a patient 17,000 miles away, having a way to get that to that patient fast enough, and to do it in a way that's safe, is an incredible challenge. And I think to see the kind of opportunities in that space, we'll be clicking into all of these carefully in a few minutes. But we're trying to solve the toughest challenges, whether it is how we use AI to predict disease, whether it is in using quantum computing to solve the most complex, hard to compute problems in designing a shop floor, or whether it is in using robotics for surgery. And of course, the digital experience. How can we make curing not just about the medicine that someone has to take, but how can it also be the experience of taking care of oneself? And how do we actually work through that process of how we take care of ourselves through either a digital experience or otherwise around that medication? If all diseases were the intersection of genetics, lifestyle, and medicine, the thing that we get to control in that is medicine and lifestyle. And in a way, caring for that in a particular way is a personal experience, but to have the opportunity to participate in that with technology, I think is a unique paradigm that we're in right now. So what could we actually see as big opportunities in a company like Johnson & Johnson, and opportunities where technology can play a role? Let's look at the whole value chain of what it takes to make medicine. In fact, I had a colleague once who remarked, and very early in my career, that sometimes it's harder to make medicine. It's harder to make medicine and take it to a patient than it is to take someone to the moon. And I thought that was a very flippant statement, but if we actually reflected on it, it takes 15 years from the perception of how we could solve for biology problems to then going through the process of researching a molecule, one molecule that may work for that specific biology problem in a possibility of n combinations. the chemistry space is incredibly vast. To find that one, find a solution that could work, that is safe and that is efficacious, takes incredible amount of time, years, and talent. To then say, okay, now we have what could be a product. How do we then see if it's to take it through clinical trials, to take it through very responsible research, and to then take it to market? It's an incredibly long innovation timeline. In fact, the interesting paradigm that I'm faced with is that the technology innovation life cycle is an incredibly short life cycle. Technology advances every 2 to 3 years, but healthcare innovation is a much longer innovation life cycle. It takes decades till we can get something right and get something to work really well. And bringing in that technology with all the science and with the biology research and the medical research is what we've learned, what we aspire and strive to do well every day. The interesting thing is that there are many ways that we're doing that actively. And when we look at the discovery world, let's start there. I'm going to use the stage a little bit to help me here. I'm going to use this phase to talk about everything in research, and then I'm going to talk about everything in development there. So we're going to break R&D into R and then D. And this is more to keep me awake because I'm fighting jet lag with this conversation. I just flew out from India a day ago. So this part, R, research, is in figuring out the what. What is going to help us, like how can we actually treat a disease? How can we actually cure a disease, whether it is therapeutic or whether it is surgical? That process is a process of understanding biology, getting biology right, understanding what causes Alzheimer's, why, and how does one study the advancement of Alzheimer's over time? It's invisible till it happens. How do we find it early? How do we treat it early? To understand the biology of how that all occurs, to treat it like a biology problem before we treat it as a psychosocial problem. Let's understand the biology. To go through that process and to then understand the scientific effect of what goes on in your body, and to then look through how we then could deliver improvement or impact to your biology is an incredibly large process. What we compute today is a very linear way. AI has helped us look at faster cycle times of computing that. There is active use of AI and there is potential for AI to be able to say, if we knew what target or what drug could make a difference here, how might we search the chemistry space for the right target? Then to say, okay, now if we know how do we formulate it? How do we make that idea of a drug into a physical thing, whether that is something that you take as a tablet or that would be something that you would be treated with otherwise? Formulating that is an incredibly vast process. And looking through new digital twins and AI to help manufacture that and think through that. So another area where there's an incredible amount of opportunity. And then finally, figuring out how to manufacture it. This is the research space. Whether it is in pharma or medtech, this is the research space, and this is an incredible space where there's a lot of opportunity for innovation. The development space talks about, okay, now we've learned that there's a potential product that could help with, say, a cancer, or that could help with neuroscience. How can we now actually develop it for patients faster? Make it as affordable as we can, make it more as efficacious as we can. This is the process of how we go through clinical research, medical research, go through regulatory safety, go through the process of understanding what the life cycle of that medication would be with the patient. This has seen incredible strides of innovation as well. In the medical tech industry, this space is majorly been advanced through robotics. To say, okay, now we know what we're trying to solve for. Now let's use robotics and AI to actually improve precision of surgery, improve reduce adverse outcomes in surgery through the surgical process. Or let's use digital technologies to track the patient after that surgery and see how, whether there's scar tissue damage or there's an impacted gait, let's see if we can identify that early enough so that if there is a need for revision surgery, we can do that sooner. So this is what's the point I'm trying to make here? The space for innovation in a company like this or in this industry is large. The responsibility for innovation is vast. And there is a lot that in almost every advancement in technology that you may have heard of in the last 5 years, there's a really good chance that that advancement is important for what we do here, most likely. And I'll end with this slide. I think that for Johnson & Johnson, the opportunity is to say, how might we use the pharmaceutical business that we are and the medtech business that we are to address healthcare needs most uniquely? For example, like I said, for lung cancer, how might we not just think of how we are treating disease or curing disease, but how we're intercepting disease, how we are going through the process of the whole patient journey in a very meaningful and important way. Now, I am going to end the slides by, and I'm going to jump a few slides and then jump back to talk about what I do in this for this and what my team does at Johnson & Johnson Innovation. We represent Johnson & Johnson's interests in early innovation with the external ecosystem and community. We work around the world. We have 4 innovation centers around the world, one in San Francisco, Boston, where I work, London, Shanghai, with many offices outside of these regions. We have incubator networks. How many of you, at least in the room, are startup founders or are a part of startups? So I think as startup founders, I'm sure you'd recognize the importance of a stable, certain, and graceful acceleration for your company, and the importance of incubator accelerators, and that I think have been recognized over the last decade. Johnson & Johnson Innovation founded its own incubator accelerator network, JLabs, about 10 years ago, roughly 10 years ago. And JLabs currently has an incredibly vast portfolio of companies that are part of the community that are working on just some of the most incredible solutions and technologies for various aspects of healthcare. We have about, I can't remember the exact number today, but I think we have about 12 JLabs around the world. And each of these are sites that have wet lab facility. They have other infrastructure capabilities, and also, most importantly, access to ecosystem, venture capital ecosystem, a talent ecosystem, an advisor ecosystem, with incubation partnerships, as well as equity investment. Johnson & Johnson Innovation supports and has enabled over 600 collaborations since 2013, with probably, I think the number now is closer to 1,000 JLabs companies that are part of the incubator networks. And we're doing this with, of course, like, we are trying to not just focus on the science and the technologies companies are advancing, but also how we're improving the representation of a diverse founder network, diverse talent network that comes through our external innovation engagement. So over 57%, and I think the number now is even higher, of companies are first-time entrepreneurs, 33% are female-led, 31% are minority-led, and we take incredible responsibility in keeping that number growing and keeping that number as an equal part of our metric, not just the value of the science that we're bringing through external ecosystems. The spaces that we partner with are the spaces that Johnson & Johnson actively has scientific interest in. So that's why, going back up, in our innovative medicine portfolio. So for those that remember Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine as Janssen Pharmaceuticals, we're now called Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine. We are majorly in these broad areas of interest: oncology, neuroscience, immunology, cardiovascular disease, pulmonary hypertension, and retina. And we have active therapeutic targets and active therapeutic research going in these areas. And we look for companies that are advancing therapies in these areas. We're also looking for companies that have platform technologies that can support this area. As someone that looks for technology companies that can support this, the kind of interesting opportunities we're seeing in this space are, for example, how can we improve our diagnosis of cancer through image recognition? Radiomic research has advanced tremendously in the last 5 years. And the ability to read a CT scan and to have AI actually detect nodules better with lower false positives and teach us more about nodule characteristics is incredible right now. And to be able to then advance that AI to be clinically validated, and of course, safe to use in a clinical environment has been an example of technologies that we've looked at in oncology. Neuroscience, it's so interesting that it's a space that is so important to all of us, and it has the least amount of data because it's a space, the opportunity for us to advance neuroscience actually is today with all of the self-care that we're doing with the wearable technologies and journals and apps that we use for our own mental health. That data can show you and can show this industry, if we choose to share with industry, what mental health actually is in real time and how we can gain more data, longitudinal data on how disease can occur. Now, mental health is not just diseases like neuropsychiatric diseases and neurodegenerative diseases, of course, but in the spaces of neuropsychiatric and neurodegenerative diseases, we have been seeing some incredible technologies to help us gather more data on what's actually going on in a patient with a mood disorder. And how do we actually track a mood disorder for a patient and make that experience of caring for themselves much better? How can we provide, along with our medicine, technologies to help patients care for those with Alzheimer's? Because Alzheimer's is not an individual's disease; it's a disease that affects the family. It's a person. It takes more than just medication. It takes a lot more. And so, looking at innovative technologies there has been incredibly useful. We have been advancing new modalities of treatments from CAR Ts to surgical robots, as I mentioned. For CAR Ts, looking at new ways of using AI and automated workflows in our production lines, as well as looking at how we can use software-guided systems for our robots has been an interesting another interesting phase for us. The fascinating thing in the space of robotic automation is that I think Austin has been a very special place for this. I think the companies that are here that are working on robots, on AI-guided automations and workflows is incredible. In fact, companies that can, automate a lab to work in a click of a button, where we don't need to rely on built labs and just a cloud-based environment to be able to guide wet lab experiments. The power that can have in scaling the kind of research that we need to do is incredible. To have robotic technologies that can help with adaptive workflows, aperiodic workflows, and not just systemic repeated workflows is a big unmet need. It's an important space. Think about going through hospital workflows that are not necessarily in the surgery room, or think about how one can work a very asynchronous manufacturing or wet lab facility with robots. It's not always systemic. Sometimes things are aperiodic. And robotic technologies there, I think there are a few companies in Austin that are working on this. It's incredible. So I've been droning a lot. I hope this is captivating your attention. What I will probably try and go into a little more is what's going to come. Like so everything I've shared are things that are here today. What are some technologies that I am personally seeing that are going to make a difference, what I think are exciting and are going to make a difference in the next 5 years? I think we've all heard about the power of generative AI, and there's obviously another event on generative AI tomorrow. The generative AI, I mean, if one had to look at it a certain way, it helps us summarize things. It helps us process information that might be unstructured or semi-structured and summarize them in a way that could be digestible in context, with context. There are large swaths of data about health that are unstructured, are sort of fragmented and spread across our ecosystem. For example, even today, there are hospitals in the world that have patient data that sits on a server, and now as EMRs try to pick them in, the homogenization of that EMR data across different networks of hospitals is still a problem. The data coming in from a surgical process or from a treatment process is still handwritten, or it's written in shorthand. To be able to make sense of that, to be able to run through that. Let me give you an example. Like in a different life, I was part of a clinical trial experience where there were um, 10, around 10 data sets from 10 different clinical trials that occurred over a span of 15 years. The way data was collected 15 years ago and the way data is collected now are not the same. How do you make sense of that data from 10 different clinical trials? The fact that generative AI can now solve for these problems so like at least perceivably so simply is, I think, a big opportunity to be able to use generative AI from the perspective of just general language, general data on medical records and on medical health, I think is one incredible opportunity. And there are companies already working on this. There are opportunities already in flight to start solving for some of these problems. Now, to solve for them at scale is not just about having good generative AI models. It's about being able to do it at the scale of incredible vast amounts of data and with incredible vast amounts of compute power, because generative AI requires a lot of compute power. So the innovation is not just in generative AI. The innovation is going to have to be across the tech stack in how we solve for AI. It's going to need ways on how we solve for the compute power, in how we do embeddings and how we think about embeddings and how we make our use of that AI responsible, ethical, and most importantly, verifiable. To have a verifiable recon network on our generative AI solutions is going to be incredibly important. And Johnson & Johnson looks at generative AI very responsibly. So our view on this has been from the ground up to say, how do we first solve for some of these things before we start adopting things at scale? So we've been learning very fast. We've made some incredible progress, but to all those working in generative AI, we are cognizant of the fact that there is so much to solve here. But the fact that the opportunities are really close by and they're very close to hand. Generative AI also has an incredible use in discovery. I'm sure so many of you may have heard of drug discovery companies using generative AI or generative modeling in their process of discovering new targets, discovering new molecules. This is not a new thing. In fact, the use of large language models in therapeutic discovery has been, researched for an incredible amount of time. However, the tools to use it and to scale it are perhaps better now than they have ever been before. The access to, for example, um, compute technologies like NVIDIA's technologies or others is more at hand today than it was ever before. And we are seeing now tools that can help us design and optimize proteins with a click of a button with good user experience, that space in the next 5 years is going to be incredibly useful. I'd be curious to see how the cost and complexity in discovering new drugs will shift tremendously in the next few years. It is an art. It is not a simple process to find a drug or a molecule that can work for something, but and it's a space that I truly don't perhaps have the expertise on, but I see the power that technology can have in this space, and I think it's incredible. Now, the other space that's quite interesting is the use of digital twins. Again, not a very new thing. I mean, we've been talking about digital twins for years. What is a digital twin? It's effectively a digital representation of a physical object or a process or a system. We've had it for years. All airplanes have it. Most of our computers use it in some way or another to check itself. But to be able to use digital twins that are dynamic, that have its own cognitive capabilities, that are perhaps capable of updating itself, regulating itself, I think is an interesting process. To be able to use that in the process of lab automation, or to be able to use it in the space of manufacturing, is a space that I mentioned a few minutes ago. It is there, it is advancing, but it's perhaps even more important as a space in the next 5 years than ever before, as the list of problems that we can solve for that are remained unsolved are becoming more apparent. And the technologies to actually use digital twins at scale are perhaps at hand right now. There are companies that are working on creating digital simulations of a complete shop floor. In fact, um, there are big tech companies that are working with EV manufacturers and automakers to look at how they can make a digital twin of a battery, and a car battery, or the car itself, to be able to then sort of predict and simulate how autopilots could work, or how better battery response could work. All that's driving the opportunities in this space. And I'm sure quantum computing has come up a few times, at least in the Austin Forum, if not in Austin itself. I think that with what the world of AI has taught us is that AI is only as good as our ability to define and articulate a problem, and to then be able to formulate that problem mathematically or through language for something to compute. There are problems in all industries, especially scientifically, especially industries that have deep engineering problems, incredibly hard problems to formulate. For example, how do I know what protein can fold in a certain condition, given the nature of proteins? What we know of proteins is, say, just a form of what, but the universe of proteins is incredibly large. How do we actually simulate how it might fold in a certain scenario? That's an n-powered n possibility with incredible constraints. Or how do I pack 50,000 boxes in a way that each box goes to a space in the shortest, fastest time possible? That's an incredibly hard problem for a computer to compute. But the use of quantum math and to apply new ways of formulating problems and then using new forms of compute to compute the problem give us the opportunity to now solve for problems that we never thought we could solve before. Whether it was how we might be able to pick the right rules in defining which patient has what disease, when, why, and how at scale, or whether it is understanding how chemistry can affect the body in a layer of complexity that could never be done before. Quantum is not just computing, it's also sensing. There are researchers that we've recently spent time with that are thinking about how they can use quantum sensing to capture inputs in our biology that we don't have technology to capture yet. Teeny-weeny sensors that can help us capture new forms of data on our body are now perhaps within grasp. While all these can help the research, The fact that generative AI and AI in general and good data science can improve our clinical trials is definitely not unnoticed. The fact that we can use wearables, we can use sensors, things that we take for granted today in a clinical trial that's still so important. And to be able to run a clean trial with the use of different layers of technology is still a complex, hard operational challenge and a technology challenge that I think there are more and more solutions for today than there were ever before. And we can now improve trial engagement. We can make sure the right patients in the right trial. We can make sure that we're able to make the trial experience more meaningful. We're able to capture data on the actual medication, the actual experience, the actual health outcomes in ways more than just patient reported. We're able to go into more layers and abstracts of information in a trial than ever before. These are just some of the examples. The big opportunity for us is in making medicine personalized. I think all of us would agree that each of our bodies work individually, very differently. I mean, I joke that I actually have my dad's body. Everything he had at 33, I got at 33. Everything I probably look like him if we go back to pictures. And it's so interesting. I'm South Indian as origin. Rice does not bother me the way wheat does. If I have not tested this per se, a friend of mine has. He put a continuous glucose monitor on himself just to make this data point. He found that the impact that blood sugar had to him with wheat was incredibly different than what he had with rice. Now, most of the data that we have on what affects our blood sugars or what affects our health, data of averages, and often from studies that have been majorly white male. The fact that a South Asian might have a different reaction to rice than wheat is perhaps known by South Asians, but not known through the community. Now imagine if I had the power to have enough data about myself. I don't want to make the assumption that rice could be better for me than wheat. But if I could have enough data about my own dietary health, my own health itself, and to then be able to make my own personalized recommendations on what could work, is perhaps the holy grail for all of us in taking care of ourselves. Even in the world of medications, even in the world of treatments, to be able to personalize a treatment based on what your specific bio. Now, this is not, this is, yes, an industry responsibility. It's something that the whole industry has to work on together. How might we go to a hospital and have and to be able to use the data we have about ourselves in a hospital with our care providers? That's obviously one part to this problem. But then how can we use all the advancements in genetic research, in treatment sort of variability, to then say, based on the data that we know of ourselves, how can we actually make sure that the medication we're going to take is actually going to help us, and it's going to help us in the way that we care about, is perhaps going to be powered more by our understanding of disease, the R, and the AI to help us process our information to be able to get there. And that is, I think, perhaps the thing that I'm most excited about. It's probably why I wake up every morning. The fact that we actually have the opportunity to have these conversations with companies that are working on teeny-weeny parts of the journey, if you look at it at the big picture, but they're incredibly important parts of the journey. And when you put it all together, there could be something fascinating about it. As long as my personal opinion, I think there is tremendous opportunity in us improving our inputs to health. How can all of us bring more technologies to gather better input? What the Apple Watch did for us in teaching us that steps could matter. Now we know steps, isn't everything, but steps can matter. That was a big step forward. To then be able to now capture data on sleep, to be able to capture data on ovulation cycles. Women's menstrual health never had this data before. It today does. And to now be able to have enough research to be grounded with data, to then be able to say, how might we actually advance uh, the care, new spaces of care that have been underinvested? I think an incredible opportunity. More input gives us an opportunity to do something. Processing that input requires data science and understanding of disease. And the more we can use technology to improve our understanding of disease and process information in more mature ways, I think the biggest learning we've needed as a health tech industry in the last decade was improving the maturity of our processing. What are the questions worth asking, and what are the questions that what are the answers that can provide best impact to actual outcomes? That processing to bring new computational methods, new methods of machine learning, or even new digital experiences that can help someone just process input as it is, I think is an incredibly important process. Now, this world of processing includes advanced supercomputing, because there are problems in healthcare that we have inputs for, we just don't have the processing, the ability to compute those questions yet. I think it's going to be an incredible process. The world of how might we improve our supply chain, our value chain through robotic process automation and AI, I think is an incredibly important industry that doesn't just help healthcare, it helps every industry where we require in our world today. The advances that Amazon has made in warehousing and robots, I think gives us the chance to now say, how do we do it in other industries that also need this solved? To then be able to go and say, how do we make things more available? How do we make them available more affordably? How do we make them available more safely? And more importantly, how do we scale? There are parts of the world where the value chains are constrained, even in today's context. Innovations in that space, incredibly important. And the last thing, and I'm missing a lot here, by the way, there is so much importance in using technology for improving access and bringing equity, diversity, and inclusion into the study of medicine. I shared one example of the fact that tracking ovulation cycles was not done at even a respectable scale till certain technologies became available for it. This is not just true here. There are so many other examples where technology must help us capture the health experiences of populations that have not been captured before or not being captured sufficiently. And this isn't just about a human's own place in community or society, gender, sex, race. This is also about disease. There are certain diseases that we don't talk about because they're taboo. Only now are we all recognizing the importance of mental health and the importance of understanding it more carefully. There are perhaps other spaces that require that much research as well. And the companies and innovators that can help expand that and look into that, I think is an incredibly important space as well. Now, not all companies can work on all spaces. To have as many companies as possible, as many innovators as possible working in spaces that they can is perhaps what's the most important thing we can all ask for. I want to keep a quick time check and perhaps just end in a couple of minutes. I just went through the stage like a jet-lagged human being, blurting out things. But it is perhaps rooted in the fact that we are so lucky to be living in an era where there is so much advancement. We're in a better time in humanity as far as health and technology is concerned than ever before. It's not just about how long we get to live, but it's about how well we get to live. And it's about how much opportunity we have to actually have a role to play in it. And if we're able to now use some of these technologies at scale, we're able to now do that for more people and in places where they're not here yet, but they can be. And we are able to then take it even further. what I shared with you is just a glimpse and an example. Obviously, I'm not an expert. I cover too much. Like, this is a lot. It's very hard. I say one of the biggest blessings in my life is that I get to learn so much every day, but I also wish I had the time to go deep in everything. But I will say that to be able to look at, for example, knees, and to recognize that how one puts a knee in a patient in comparison to where the other knee is right now, and how hips actually affect gait more than knees can. And if the hips are not good, the knees can make a difference. And then to say, how might technology help with that? How can, if gait is an important metric and range of motion is an important metric in how someone with a knee surgery can recover, what are the possibilities? Or to be able to go into, say, spine surgery and recognize that the unmet need there is in disc health. How might we look for companies that are advancing technologies in biomaterials, in new forms of material that can actually replace a disc? Because the disc is, perhaps what I learned, is a very, very precious part of our bodies. And to be able to find replacements for that is hard. When we all like work our spines, the part of the spine that is most precious is our discs. And how can we now look for technology companies that are looking at new tools for biomedical engineers to find new material to then formulate into a disc that can then help us have the same range of motion with our spine anymore? You can see how the scale of problems that we're trying to solve here are incredibly deep. I will end by saying, stay in touch. If there is any way, Johnson and Johnson, if you're working on something that is in the space that Johnson and Johnson is in, reach out to Johnson and Johnson Innovation. The Austin Forum has my contact information. And if there are companies if there are technologies that you're trying to advance that can affect humanity in an incredible way, firstly, best wishes and thank you. And secondly, if there's any way I can help, I will. I'll pause here for questions.
All right. No, Varun, stay here. We got questions up on the stage coming up. As always, we have questions that were submitted through the Slack workspace, and one of those will be selected to win a South by Southwest badge. I always pick different curator for those questions each time. Somebody that I know can go through those questions while listening to the presentation and make sure to ask questions that expand upon the presentation. This presentation was about technologies and how they advance healthcare. So I'm very pleased to introduce our question moderator for tonight, and it's actually two moderators for tonight. You met them out front. Please welcome to the stage Numa Damani and Maggie Engler, the authors of Introduction to Generative AI. So Maggie and Numa will alternate asking you questions that were submitted during the event. Here you go.
Hello.
Hi. Getting organized here. While she does that, I'm going to ask a question. Are there any specific FDA barriers with AI-supported generated solutions to big problems?
Say that again.
Are there any specific FDA barriers with AI-supported or generated solutions to big problems?
Are the FDA barriers to AI-generated solutions to problems? The answer is yes. I would not call them barriers. I would call them guardrails. That there are, and it's an evolving space of guidance from the FDA and other regulators around the world on how AI can augment and contribute to human intervention of disease and therapeutic care. For example, I mentioned the use of AI to read CT scans. It's important to, like anything that we do to our health or to our planet, it has to be checked, double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked, and to have mechanisms and guardrails to be able to do that in a way that is standardized and that is applicable industry-wide is, I think, an active conversation with regulators around the world. There's also the world of how are we using the data that we get? How are we making sure that we are protecting privacy? We are using data ethically, responsibly. All of that is part of a regulatory framework that is necessary for the use of AI. AI cannot get all answers right. It isn't general intelligence. It isn't general intelligence trained for a specialty. Very important. Like we sometimes, I think, reduce the fraction. We reduce our human intelligence to a fraction sometimes. I think it's not that doctors can always be right. Doctors can also make mistakes, but AI can make mistakes that can be left unaccounted for. And I think that understanding what those are and to make sure that we are using it responsibly does require, in my opinion, guardrails.
Thank you. The next question, you touched on quantum technology for health in your talk, is what areas of quantum sensing do you see opportunities to interact with human anatomy?
It's a very early space, and I must admit, I don't know too much about it yet. I'm learning. I've been spending a lot of time in spaces where there is quantum sensing research right now. There's a lot in Chicago that has been incredibly interesting. I think I know of research that's active right now in using quantum sensing to learn about what happens above the blood-brain barrier, to actually use quantum sensors in our brains to be able to capture neuron input to medication or to any sort of therapeutic intervention. They're also trying to use quantum sensing to capture new input methods of just cognitive activity. I think all these are great. I don't know much about the space, so I welcome everyone to sort of read and obviously educate me. And I think though that what we are aware of though is that it's a space that is going to be incredibly important. Why? It's going to increase our input paradigm. And when new sensors can improve our input paradigm, its value across what we do in research and development becomes very precious.
Thank you. The next question is, so AI has promise for developing tailored and individualized medicine. Do you think that increases the risk of healthcare inequality?
Does it increase the risk of healthcare quality? It can. The answer is it can. I think this is also why we need to understand AI better and we have to build AI better. And I think we're doing that. I mean, where AI was 4 years ago to where AI is today to where AI will be is, I think, a strong leap forward. The issue isn't necessarily with AI, it's about how we use AI. In the end of the day, AI is just a tool. If I take a pen and if I poke myself, it's going to hurt. I got to learn how to use a pen. You write with it, you don't poke. I think in a way, the thing with AI is that we don't always know what it can and cannot do. That's just this phase of maturity we are in right now. And I think that's the first opportunity for all of us, is to maybe be as educated as we can, and most importantly, contribute as much as we can ourselves to learn what can AI do and what can AI not do. Therefore, then to know how to use a tool in the best way possible.
And on that subject of where to use AI, could you give any examples of seeing AI applied to health and that exceeding expectations? And similarly, any examples where it maybe failed?
Well, some experts in AI in the room will tell me it's not AI, but it was AI when I used it. It was, in a way, it was good programming and good sort of statistical programming. The app Noom was important to me. It was like very, very important to me. And it helped me manage my personal like physical diet and physical weight better than any other coach, any other person ever has. I will always, my respect for the value of digital therapeutics went up after I used Noom for myself. And I think it's, in a way, it tailors how we take care of ourselves physically and dietarily and otherwise through our inputs, and it keeps us in a regime. I think it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And while the version of Loom that I use may have not been AI per se, it's I think more a digital experience that uses good statistical programming. If I had to be very respectful for what AI is, I think that's one. I think AI is working very actively in I'm thinking about whether what I can and what I can't disclose. So what I think AI is working very well in the field of electronic health records. I think we are seeing now more companies using AI to sparse through that data and make good sense of that data. And I think it's really good. And also using that then further downstream in care management. I think it's really good. Whereas AI been a disappointment? I don't think there is a space I'd say I've been disappointed. There are spaces where it's advancing slowly, but I can empathize with why it's moving slowly, either because the data to advance the AI is limited, or the maturity in question framing for that AI or the AI design is immature. These are very natural states of evolution in all industries. It's important for all of us to not sort of judge them because of their current state. Even the best technologies go through perhaps very quick sunsets just by providence. So I would not say there is a space I'd say is deeply disappointed me. Sorry.
Could you elaborate on how the latest technologies can help break through specific bottlenecks in treatment development?
In treatment development, I think I spoke about this in a way in my presentation, and I know I went a little fast. Treatment development, in terms of how one can go through treatment development for a patient. So if say I want to do a treatment program for, let's say, hypertension. Right now, the data that I get on what I can do for my hypertension is based on my primary care physician, who can then probably say, you need either a beta blocker, you need, here are your 4 or 5 options of medication. You know what, we're going to try you on one. Let's wait a week, or let's wait 4 and let's try you on another. Let's see what works, trial and error. If AI could if I could generate enough data about myself, genetically and otherwise, to have a general sense, to have a digital twin of my cardiovascular system, to then say, okay, for Varun, and based on the digital twin of his cardiovascular system and what we can compute based on the digital twin on what medications could work, why not try 10? Let's try 2. That saves Varun too many deliveries of medication over 25 months, and it reduces my need to deal with side effects. Now, secondarily, dealing with hypertension is not just medication, it's also lifestyle. How can AI keep track of, Varun, that meeting, you were incredibly stressed. Take a minute and take a breather. My Apple Watch already does that for me. But imagine if it was part of the plan. Imagine if I'm able to then say, Varun, too many ice creams this week, take a break. My wife does that already and she does a great job. But if she's not in town, then AI can help me do that. To then say hypertension also requires regular capture of blood pressure. To have a cuff that automatically captures data, uses it on a cloud. I want to make an important distinction here. Not all of this are AI solutions. The idea of being able to take a cuff and to take data from it to a cloud that is automatically connected to my phone, that is automatically computing through AI, is not an AI problem. It's a computer science problem. It's an IT problem. I want to respect and honor the fact that the solutions that are needed for healthcare are not just AI. We need more IT people in healthcare. And I think tech. That's why I always say I don't just support like data science and AI external innovation. I say technology, because sometimes we need better technology to be able to do these things. We take the fact that our watch and our phone are just connected together all the time for granted. The amount of engineering ingenuity that allows that to happen is incredibly important. In fact, if we go to hospitals today, and actually see how they work. You'd be surprised. Like I have a family member whose clinic still runs on Windows 7 and they can't move out of it because the software they use for their clinic will only work on Windows 7. Do we all realize what an important bottleneck that is? Windows 7 is not cloud first, which means these machines are not necessarily connected and architected in a way where AI solutions can be deployed, or, there are incredible bottlenecks that are technology and IT and computer science related, not just AI related. But AI could do all of this if we actually solved a tech problem and a computer science problem, not necessarily the AI problem.
Picking up on the idea of digital twins, one audience member asked, is it possible or impossible to create digital twins of humans and diseases to truly simulate the effect of medicine or pharmaceuticals virtually? And if so, how long do you think it will take?
It's possible, and parts of it are already there. There are companies that are simplifying the process. Now, what makes a digital twin hard? Is it the concept of a digital twin? Nope. It's the technology part of it. It's actually the IT part of it, because you need vast amounts of data. If I want to have a simulation of my heart, I need to have spatial structural information of my heart, its measurements, its bioactivity, its cellular wall, images of its cellular wall and cavities, actual, like image video data of the heart valve and how it moves, how it works against other organs. Meaning, if you want to, it's like how you draw something on a piece of paper. You need to see it. To make a digital twin, you need to see it, and you need to not see it statically. You need to see it dynamically, and to then be able to say there are input parameters that change this heart. When Varun runs, it beats faster. When Varun is stressed, it beats faster. When Varun is asleep, it beats slower. I scream faster, so on and so forth. Like that takes a lot of data, which means I need the technology to actually capture that data. Second, I need ways to teach AI to use this data in a certain rhythm and in a certain way to be able to create a digital twin. There are technologies right now that have no code, low code platforms to be able to take data objects and create digital twins with those data objects without needing to code too much. That's an incredible win for use of digital twins. Now that technology can only do that for processes right now, because capturing data for a processes, whether it's a manufacturing process or a lab process, is easier than capturing it for a heart. But if we're able to have input methods or other methods to actually capture that data, this is quite possible. And I want to say this goes into the problem of I don't want to call a quantum problem, but a non-traditional compute problem or a resurface compute problem. Because I don't know if quantum can solve this problem, but there are other methods of advanced computing that's not just quantum. But imagine having to compute all of that. That's a lot. That's like Jarvis from Avengers. That's like a lot. But it takes a lot of energy and a lot of calculation and a lot of sort of consistent calculation over time to be able to do something like that. The point I'll leave with is one thing that we have to remember is that the cost of training a generative AI model is in the millions because of the cost of compute to be able to run a generative AI for incredible amounts of time to train itself. It's important to recognize that these are the answer to this question and the previous question is solve the IT and the technology problem, not just data science problems. I think in the last decade, we've realized that data scientists are incredibly important in our economy. I feel like technologists are equally as important. And I think there is a growing need for us to solve technology problems along with data science problems.
No, thank you for that. The next question is, health tracking devices are a big part of our lives and we carry them everywhere. I've got two on me right now. How is the data generated by them being used to transform medicine, and how do you think they may evolve over the next couple of years?
So I mentioned a few examples in my conversation or my speech. I think that how is it advancing? The industry of sleep has been going through an incredible advancement in the last decade, I feel. Like the number of sleep startups that are studying sleep health and that are recognizing the input parameters around sleep and how we can sort of adjust sleep and improve sleep with those input parameters is improving like crazy. And it's not just wearable intervention, there's also medical intervention or environmental intervention. For example, the prevalence of sleep apnea, I think, was not necessarily respected till recently. And most adults over 30 have to be careful about it, especially if they are overweight. And to have that data to do that, I think comes from wearables in a way. There are many other, are there ideas of other diseases or other medical spaces that could be advanced if we wore wearables and tracking devices more? I think ear health is very important. As someone who uses my AirPods every day, I do sometimes wonder, especially with history of um, hearing loss in my family, I do sometimes wonder if I'm advancing it with the use of headphones. I'm not someone who would assume that that's the case right away. I've been in the field to know that it's not, we need data to be sure about that. But to have sensors to be able to track ear health, I think is incredibly important. Eye health, similarly. To be able to maybe women's health itself, I think is only starting now, but I think there is so much more to grow and track there. And I think it requires more research and investment. Those are some examples.
Great, thank you. There's a couple questions around some specific roles that AI might play in healthcare, in addition to some of the kind of disease prevention and things that we've mentioned. So how could AI or other technological advancements increase access to healthcare or and help address a sort of supply chain question? So identifying when treatments might be needed.
I think the answer to this is we have a lot to learn from countries from countries that are already trying to solve for this. Africa, India, a lot of South Asian countries, a lot of Far East countries using mobile digital technologies to improve access to knowledge and also access to care. I think COVID taught us how important telemedicine can be to our society. In fact, most of the like appointments I have now with my healthcare provider often happen through telehealth rather than in person. But more importantly, I think we now have tools that can not just help us engage with our care providers better, whether it's mobile or otherwise, but also access content. Now, I do think we still have a little ways to go in being able to use AI to tell us what's actually, what are some good healthcare solutions. I would not yet recommend using AI to say, why do I have this cough? Because AI can hallucinate, or it might have a fun recommendation on why, and it might be absolutely wrong. Healthcare takes experience. It requires experience. There's a reason why we all go to that doctor we've known in our family for years, and we go to someone who trusts, because it takes more than just a few vectors of information to decide what's actually going on. But I think mobile and digital technologies are already doing that. Now, there is an opportunity for better smart devices that can help with care. For example, in many parts of the world, surgery is not an ambulatory care experience. They have to be admitted. Like here, if anyone goes for hip surgery, knee surgery, or any like simple surgery, they go in the morning and they're out in the evening. There are parts of the world where they have to be in that hospital for weeks. For example, retina, like surgery, cataract surgery. There are parts of the world where it's not a 15-minute operation. And the burden that can have on the healthcare system impacts access. And having better technology, better devices to help with safety, hygiene, the biggest reason why, at least in part of me, when I did an eye surgery at almost a decade and a half ago, I had to have all sorts of artifacts on my face to protect it from water getting in then, or I couldn't wash my hair. Like these are very simple, um, problems to solve with good technology and good design. Good design, not just design. We have to really understand what it takes for people to use things for sustained amounts of sustained amounts of time. And I think there are some incredible opportunities there as well.
Thank you. So this is going to be the last question before we announce our South by Southwest badge winner question. So I'm going to bundle up a couple of questions into one. So there are a lot of questions around just Gen AI, any specific use cases, how it's being used right now, and how are risks being mitigated with it in the healthcare. So how you're testing for it, what does hallucinations look like, what do you do about bias? So if you could speak a little bit about Gen AI.
I think I covered a good bit of it in my talk. What did I not cover?
Specific use case.
A specific use case. Okay, let me give a specific use case that I think is going to be pretty interesting. If we can use, no, generative AI helps us summarize things that are hard to summarize. If we can, okay, hallucinations are not always a bad thing. There are parts of our, like when we're painting something, hallucinations enable our creative output. And in some scenarios, hallucinations can bring good creative solutions. In the process of cellular engineering, or in the process of looking for the best permutation and combination of molecules to work on something, to have a bit of creativity in that process is actually a benefit. In discovery, hallucination is not an issue, it's a feature, it's a benefit. And to be able to use hallucinations well in that space of discovery, I think is important and powerful. Now, I think the use cases of Gen AI, I think we have spoken about, and frankly, think of anything that that requires a decision tree. You know, in all of us when we were at school learned decision trees. Do I ask this person out to to a prompt? Yes? No. If yes, what can happen? What are the possible combinations? If no, what are the possible combinations? What are the input data for each of those that'll help change how that would go? Decision tree with different vectors of input. Generative AI allows us to look at unstructured information in a method of decision trees and then summarize them into answers that we may be able to make sense of. If we look at biology, that's the same thing. If we gave it prompts, and if we gave prompts or questions or input factors to generative AI, it takes the language of biology and makes sense of it. In English language, it can do the same. Any use case that it can do it with, I think, is an incredible opportunity. Most people there are companies are for the most part well indexed. Things related to medical information, clinical information. I think the biggest opportunity in generative AI, and I'll leave you with this, is verification. And this goes into your question of how do we check? How can we create generative AI to keep track of generative AI? Formal verification. Make sure that we are making tools and solutions that can help us have good ways of prompt verification, of tracing back embeddings and knowing how something worked, how it got to an answer, and why it did that. And to be able to do it not just at the levels of a ChatGPT or a Bard, but to be able to do it in the tools that we're using on a daily basis. The future of generative AI is not just going to be these 3 or 4 tools that we read about in the news. They're going to be custom models. They're going to be custom models for custom applications. Now, to be able to have a standard framework on how we do formal verification, not just once in a while, but every time, I think is going to be important. In summary, I think generative AI, we need to start thinking about who are the cops, who are the firemen, who are the support system for generative AI, metaphorically speaking, and what tools can help us bring that to not one generative AI, but all generative AI.
Thank you. So I guess I get to announce the South by Southwest badge winner. We do like a drum roll or something? Thank you. So this question is from Kartik Srinivasan. Are they here? Oh my gosh, yay. Okay, congratulations. And then the question is, healthcare, particularly in the US, is known for having stringent regulations regarding patient data. AI and ML require access to vast amounts of unbiased data for models to be trained and developed. How is the healthcare industry gaining access to this information, and is the government developing policy in this area to encourage data availability, and what incremental protections regarding patient data are being put in place? So basically, how do we make data available for training these AI systems while protecting patient privacy?
This is an incredible question, and unfortunately, I'm not an expert to answer this question. But the regulations on the use of data is actually, it isn't a strong inhibitor. It is actually useful to be able to say what is PII, what is non-PII, what is patient identifiable information, what is non-patient identifiable information. Within non-patient identifiable information, what is type 1, type 2, type 3 data, and how can I use it more usefully? The use of the access to this data and the use of this data has slowed down the sharing of information, and most importantly, the ownership of the models that use that information. But in a way, I may not be an expert to say how regulations are changing and how that can work. I know there are a lot of ideas that are actively talked about. I don't know what's actually, what's actually making a difference. But I think if I had to give my opinion on just the meta view of this, I think I don't know if the lack of regulation will make things progress any better anyway. I think regulation is important. It may slow us down, but at least it'll make us careful. And I think in healthcare, being careful is more important than being fast. Being fast, being first does not matter because it's life, everything is life and death. Everything's a human life. So
Thank you.